Good morning, and I apologize that you all had to hear that. Wonderful. It's good to be with you this morning, and I'm sorry that we're not together in person. It is such a joy to know that Pastor Scott is online with us this morning, and to hear, sir, that you are on the road to recovery. We've been praying for you, and it's also kind of a treat, not that it's a competition, but it's kind of a treat to zoom into a church that has both an Emmy and a Grammy winner in your midst. So as the acting conference minister for the Southern California, Nevada Conference of the United Church of Christ, and none of that fits on a business card, I spend a lot of time speaking with pastors and congregations about how the church is changing and how that will change all of us. And I think you probably know that full well. I have had the pleasure of working with your dedicated, patient, adaptive, and conscientious search committee for some time now. I know your church is living in a time of great transition. And so together, many of us wonder if we will ever again be the church we used to be. And some of us wonder if we should be. So you've heard this morning's text, the familiar passage from the Gospel of John, a story I believe that provides insights for those of us who are living and adapting to these times of change and challenge and transition, especially as we enter into another new year. And at this point in the new year, the research reveals that very few of us are anywhere close to the change resolutions we made about a month and a half ago. But I bring you to the text that you heard this morning, and I want to offer a little insight from the previous verses to give you some context into the story. You know the story. The sisters, Martha and Mary, have sent word to Jesus, and they've said, "Lord, the one you love is sick." And I sometimes wonder how long it took them to get that message to Jesus and how that actually happened. But at some point, Jesus gets the message, and he says to his traveling companions, "Our friend, our beloved friend, Lazarus, has fallen asleep, and I'm going there to wake him up." Now, that could also be a little euphemism and foreshadowing mixed in there. But as we follow the story, we understand the context that Jesus has been traveling with his followers and his friends. And he's been walking, and he's been teaching and listening, as was his custom. And he was also speaking of his own death. No doubt he had a wonder or a worry about where all of this was going. And his disciples misunderstood, thinking that he was talking more about going into a natural kind of sleep. So this is all running in the background. And we saw Ms. Marshall sharing with you this morning how sometimes teaching Sunday school can have lots of unexpected joys and challenges. I imagine Jesus had kind of a similar mindset when he's on his way to see Martha and Mary. People weren't really understanding what he was trying to tell them. So on his arrival, he finds that Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days. Many Jews had come to comfort and support Martha and Mary on the loss of their brother. That was a custom. And so when Jesus appears on the scene, he's greeted by Martha. And she says, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died." And that makes me wonder if that is a statement of rebuke or an expression or testimony of her faith. And here's where we join the text you heard this morning. So Jesus is making his way in from the time with the crowds. He's been traveling. He's been making his way by walking with people, listening to people, being with people. Have you ever met people? Sometimes they can be draining. He's been doing the first century version of multitasking. And the text says that he's greatly disturbed. Other versions say that he's upset or that he's groaning. And again, I wonder why. These earlier verses remind us he's been giving of himself, pouring himself out to others. He's been talking about life and death and resurrection, and those were difficult concepts then as they are now. And I'm sure people were puzzled, like people are puzzled today. Is this about physical, actual, literal life and death? Or is it symbolic? Is it a metaphor for something else? It makes us wonder about his frame of mind. But we don't have to wonder about how he felt. He loved these people. They were his friends. He made his way to get to them. And then in the one verse that most people have memorized in the Bible, Jesus wept. His emotion was at the surface. That's how he comes onto this scene, into the lives of friends and followers. And you know, it was customary at the time to place a deceased person outside the settlement in a family cave. The cave would be sealed with a large stone. You know that part of the story. And it wasn't as though then they had visiting hours and people came to pay their respects. It was a different custom. So he makes his way to the tomb, not because it was customary to go in and visit the departed, but he makes his way to the tomb. And of all the things he could have said and done, Jesus says, move the stone away. Move the stone away. Notice Jesus didn't move the stone away. And I'm sure the people who were gathered there were wondering why he wanted to have the tomb opened. Did he want to go inside? Did he want to see his friend? Did he want to see if he was really dead? And of course, you know there are other places in the scriptures where a stone has been rolled away. Is that foreshadowing? It's a strange request. That kind of visitation was not typical. They probably weren't expecting it. And notice he didn't say, I'm sorry I'm late. He had no explanation of resurrection or reassurance here. And so Martha comes on the scene again, and ever the practical one, the one who's usually most likely to get in the middle of things, provides the pragmatic. But Lord, it's been 4 days since he died. If you open that tomb, there will be a bad smell. Another unexpected response. And here comes Jesus again with more of the unexpected. He elevates the conversation with, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? No mention of Lazarus, no mention of his travels, no mention of the 4 days. And with no easy effort or feat, a group rolls the stone from the entrance. And in doing so, they open up the space and they let the light in and they let the air in and they let the stench out. And then Jesus looks up, using this as another teachable moment to point friends and family to the source of life. Jesus gives thanks to God. He gives glory. He gives attention. He gives attribution to God. And then he cries out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. He didn't go in and lay hands on him to heal him. Jesus didn't roll the stone. Jesus didn't carry him out. He simply and forcefully called him out. The doorway had been opened. The obstruction had been removed. The direction was clear. Come out. Make your way by walking out. Out of the sleep, out of the tomb, out of the old and into the new and into what comes next. Imagine watching this exchange between Lazarus and Jesus. Lazarus, maybe dead, or like they say in the Princess Bride movie, mostly dead. Who knows? But he was sealed off from the rest of the world. He was in the dark. He was in the stench. And then here's Jesus, the source of love and truth and wisdom and healing and light and hope and revelation and second chances. And then the next unexpected event is that Lazarus comes out. And Jesus points to and calls to and engages with the people like us who would have been the onlookers and the bystanders and the people saying, I can't believe this just happened. And Jesus asks them to participate. He says, unwrap his hands and his feet. Unwrap the cloth from his face. Jesus says, take the cloth off and let him go. Let him go and do what? Let him go and wipe off the stink. Let him go so that he can be unbound. Let him go and live and tell his story and embody and embrace the life of second chances. And you see, here's where this story, an accurate retelling or the power of a beloved sacred story, here's where we meet the story. Here's where we ask ourselves the question, what is this for us? He called the crowd to participate. He called the crowd to co-create with him. He called us by calling them to be part of life and death and resurrection. And as we look to 2024 to see what this new year holds for us, as we reckon with the strong possibility that we may never again be the church we used to be, we have an opportunity to embrace the promise of our forebearers who always believed there would be more truth and light to come. So take a moment to wonder with me. What might be blocking or binding us? What might need some fresh air? In what ways are we being called back into the light, back into life? You know, I marvel that nowhere in the story did Lazarus say, sorry, hello, I'm a little too dead to do what you're calling me to do. In waking up, he leaves all of that behind. And Lazarus walks into his new life. Do we have the courage to consider what binds us, what darkens our environment? For me, the power of this story is that even when we think we are closed off and have nothing left, the Spirit of God calls us to take that next step away from what was and into what might be, beyond who we were and toward who we might become. The still speaking God continues to awaken us from our sleep and beckon us toward the light of life. Will you pray with me? Oh God, you are the source of light and life. And so we come to you as we are, not who we usually pretend to be. We are unfinished business. And so we bring our fatigue and our fear and our confusion and our anxiety to you. You who are the seeker of our souls and the champion calling us to a better version of ourselves through second chances, through new life, through next chapters. May the echoes of your love reverberate in our midst, call us out, and transform us day by day. Amen.